Welcome into the Fantasy Football Brothers YouTube channel. My name is Blake, and I'm here with my younger brother Carson. And today, we're going to be doing some running back rankings for 2022. Carson, are you ready to get this going?
Yeah, I'm ready to get this going. This week, we have slightly different tiers from the quarterbacks, but in essence, they're the same idea. So elite would be the top end guys, whereas running back 1 would be the remainder in the top 12. Running back 2 would be the next 10 to 12, and then flex would be kind of those like third tier running backs that you're not starting every week but have the ability to be in your flex position. And then stash kind of goes hand in hand with handcuff, so if they're just a handcuff to one of your running backs or another running back in the league, or they have the upside later on because their opportunity, potentially a rookie, they'd go there. So yeah, we have some differences in our rankings because I actually looked at his before we recorded this time. So yeah, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, so we're going to start alphabetically, right? So
We certainly can.
yeah, it's not really a fun one, in my opinion, but Cam Akers. I had him at RB2, and I see that you have him at flex, but I don't like him at RB2. I hate his ADP. I really do. And I feel like
So why'd you put him there?
I put him at the back end of RB2, to be fair. And I feel like it was more...
Yeah.
I really do feel like the ADP influenced me to make me feel like I had to put him there, but since you made the bold move of putting him at flex, I'm going to just go ahead and do it.
Okay, that's fair. So I think here's my rationale. We haven't seen him perform at the next level, meaning the NFL. Obviously, we've seen him for a few plays, but no considerable sample size with him. And he's coming off of a major injury. So,
Yeah.
What about that whole, combination of elements makes you feel confident drafting him at ADP, especially?
I think
everyone
go ahead, finish. I'll add what
I was just going to say, if he's your third running back taken, throw him in the flex because there's, potential for huge upside. But in terms of going into the season, I can't confidently say he's better than all of the guys that I have ranked above him that are proven players or at least not coming off of serious injury.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the upside of him is he's still young, and I think he was drafted very highly in last year's drafts just because of the opportunity, but then he suffered his injury probably in preseason is how it lined up. And I see right here, 11 days ago, Sean McVay saying that he's looking better after a full off season, but like we saw Darrell Henderson perform, there's no reason to think that he's just going to be completely out of the picture. And
Agreed.
so I think you could be
It's
happy.
going to limit his upside.
Yes, I think you could be happy with him as your third running back, but with his ADP, that's almost impossible unless you're drafting 3 running backs first, and I don't know if Akers is the one I want to get as my third, if that's the strategy for that. So, yeah, I guess we're throwing him in flex. I think that's kind of bold, but we both don't really like him. So,
Well, I mean, I don't know how you can make a very strong argument for him being above that when, with what kind of a player he is, what he's done so far.
agreed. So next up is Saquon Barkley, and this is another disagreement, but another time where I had him near the end of RB1, which is where Blake has him. But I ended up putting him at the top of RB2. But again, I'm just gonna go ahead and put him in RB1 because
Okay.
there are a few guys that were just near the edge, and I was just like, okay, you agree there, so I'm just gonna agree. And I just really like Saquon. I think that we got to remember, he finished as RB1 in PPR scoring his rookie year. And he's 2 years off of the ACL. And there's the next running back on the roster is Matt Breida. And he's got the best head coach potentially of his career, at least offensively minded. So I think there's a lot to like, and he's still only 25.
Yeah, plenty to like about Saquon. Obviously, his past performances have left you feeling burnt if you had him on your team. But I think there's the potential, obviously, with him still being young, and the Giants looking to take a step forward with a new head coach. I think there's an opportunity there where he can finish inside the top 12. He's ranked 11th for me personally.
Yeah, he's probably the focal point of that offense realistically, and I think he should be. So just what makes it kind of difficult is like nearing the end of last season, he was almost benchable which is kind of just crazy to think about. And I know that Devontae Booker, who was getting a lot of receptions, is gone now, and that was kind of hurting his value near the end of the season, which was surprising, which kind of added to his downfall in the eyes of many fantasy managers. But it's like, what has changed? Well, I guess another offseason off of the injury and the head coach. So I think that's just enough to make you feel more confident in him.
Yeah, and the fact that he's, 25, like you said, he's still got tread on the tires, so to speak. So I think there's a good chance that he bounces back this year.
All right, so we can move on to Michael Carter, who we both have as a stash. I don't think there's really a whole lot to talk about. I mean, they drafted him last year and already drafted the first running back off the board, so I can't imagine he has a ton of upside unless Breece Hall is just a complete bust.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, obviously they would not have drafted a player like Breece Hall if they were expecting Michael Carter to handle the majority of the workload. I think he's going to be the third down running back, and although arguably Breece Hall has a 3-down type of play style and build and everything there, so there's a lot going on, like a lot of hype around Breece Hall.
Yeah.
When we get to him later on, or right away, if we want to throw out the alphabet.
Sure, we can do that real quick because their value kind of depends on each other.
Okay, so I'm saying that Breece Hall belongs in the RB2 category, kind of middle of the road. Obviously, it's still the Jets, and did you hear about Zach Wilson's potential knee injury last night in preseason?
Yeah, I did.
So it's come out that he's expected to miss between 2 and 4 weeks. As of this recording, that would put him, kind of on the cusp of missing or maybe still making week 1 of the regular season. But, honestly, I don't think that really makes a big difference. That team was arguably better with Zach Wilson off the field last season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's Joe Flacco. Plenty of checkdowns, and he's a much more competent starting quarterback, I would argue, than Zach Wilson is at this stage in his career. But, yeah, I mean, I think that Breece is going to be given the workload to support RB2 numbers this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, a rookie always finishes near that top 20 range, and I feel like if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him. I think you could feel happy with him as your RB2 if you got some strong wide receivers, but just because, at the end of the day, he is a rookie on the Jets, but I think he has a really good opportunity. So I think you still feel pretty good about him. We can move on to Nick Chubb, and I'm going to agree. I'm going to put him right behind Saquon in RB1. I think what limits him is really Kareem Hunt, which I think I read something that he might want to trade. Have you read something about that too, or is that just the contract
situation? Kareem Hunt requested a trade. He requested a trade. The Browns shut it down. And he's kind of in an interesting spot because he is, I believe, in his last year in his deal, so looking for an extension. And we know with Cleveland that they have a competent backup in D'Ernest Johnson already, so he may find himself Kareem Hunt may find himself in a situation this season where anything can happen, but the fact that they shut down his trade request immediately, I think is pretty telling.
Yeah, and I think we'll move on to Hunt once we're done with Chubb, but let's just finish talking about Chubb real quick. I think what keeps Chubb at a low end running back 1 and not much higher and not much lower is just how great of a rusher he is. Every single year of his career, over 5 yards per carry. That is extremely good. But his highest reception in a year was 36 receptions, and I'm not even sure if Hunt was there that year. That might have been his first year at Cleveland. And Hunt is starting to kind of vulture some touchdowns from Chubb, but, he was 4 yards off of 1,000 rushing yards his rookie year, and every other year he's done it. So just from that floor alone, I think he has to be a low-end RB1, but I wish that Hunt wasn't there just for touchdown vulturing purposes.
Yeah, I would say this. If Kareem Hunt were not there, you could argue that Nick Chubb belongs in the elite category, especially for fantasy football.
Yeah.
Just because he is just a top-notch pure rusher.
He's an elite rusher,
obviously,
for sure.
Yeah, obviously the lack of passing game utilization hurts his value in PPR scoring, but he still always seems to find a way to finish around the 8 to 12 mark at running back. So you got to keep him at RB1, I think.
Yeah, and we can move on to placing Kareem Hunt. I have him at flex. I see that you have him at RB2, and I know that you had him on your team last year, and you are way higher on his ADP, I'm sure. So if you want to elaborate on that, I will let you, because I like him too, but I'll let you take it away.
Okay. So I think I kind of considered his trade request when ranking him, because if he does end up on a different team this season, I think he does finish as an RB2.
Totally agree.
But also, even on Cleveland, he still is usually a top 20 to 25 guy. So he's right on the edge of RB2 status. If he does get dealt this season, I think he makes that next jump up in tier from flex to RB2 in your mind. Yeah. And I just, he's the most talented backup running back in the NFL, and because he's not truly a backup. The circumstances that allowed him to land at Cleveland were unfortunate and kind of, tainted his career a little bit, but I think the talent is definitely there. He's going to find himself in a new opportunity next season, I think, and he's going to take the next step up because he is that talented.
Yeah, if he was on a different team, 100%, I feel like he would safely be an RB2. For me, he's at the top of my flex just because, he started the season last year before he got injured very, very well. Out of his first 5 games, had 4 of them 16 fantasy points or higher in PPR. But what worries me about that is that he also had 5 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, which is even more surprising, in his first 5 games. I expect sort of a negative regression on that. But I know that you had him at the beginning of the year, probably drafted as your 3rd running back or later, and you were loving that. I don't expect him to get that many touchdowns again, but so how are you feeling about ranking him between flex and RB2? It's very close either way, so it's kind of trivial, but...
Yeah, I've got him towards the end of my RB2 rankings at running back 22. So I'm okay with putting him at flex with the uncertainty of how he'll be used in this offense, especially with, Jacoby Brissett likely leading the way for most of the season, it's looking like at this point. So it definitely hurts his value to not have Deshaun Watson playing, and obviously Nick Chubb being ahead of him is also a detriment, but I'll go either way. If you want to go flex, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'll go top of flex.
He's right on the edge for me.
I'll go top of flex, higher than Akers, which is crazy when you look at ADP. The ADP of Cam Akers is 34 and Kareem Hunt is 80. So we are definitely saying wait a little bit longer for that value. Yeah, okay, we can...
And that's overall ADP.
Yes, overall ADP.
Not running back specific.
Running back 80, yeah. Overall ADP. We can move on to James Conner, who we both have as an RB2, I believe.
Yep.
Not off the top of my head, I don't remember, but do we like him more than Breece Hall? I put him higher than Breece Hall just by 1, but...
I put him 1 spot ahead of Breece Hall.
So we agree on that. And our rankings within the tiers are somewhat representative of how we feel, but it's most important about the tiers themselves, but... We'll sort of order it.
Once we get into the flex and the stash category, it gets a little more shaky in terms of how we're ranking each player ahead of the other. I feel good about my rankings between elite and RB2. So I do have him ahead of Breece Hall. I think with no Chase Edmonds to compete for touches. The running back room in Arizona is a lot less competitive, we'll say, for James Conner's usage. And I think that, it's still going to be a high-powered offense. He got tons of goal line work last season. I expect that to stay the same. Obviously, you can't count on, what did he have, 18 touchdowns total? But either way, so... that's a high number to expect to repeat, but even a few fewer touchdowns, he's still going to be a solid RB2.
I've even seen on the depth chart that for a while it was Darrell Williams listed as the second, and now it's Eno Benjamin, so that just shows that they don't even know who's the second guy behind him, which I think makes you feel even safer about him just getting the bulk of the carries. So I think you got to be happy with that. And yeah, the only concern of James Conner is injury, how injury prone he is.
I was just going to go into that.
But
last season was his best year in terms of amount of games played.
Yep. which
So,
is
if
yeah.
anything, that's a positive sign.
It is, and that's actually really surprising that it also was his best fantasy finish because of that his second season where he finished seventh, right whenever Le'Veon had just
Well,
left.
that does kind of make sense though because it's the most games played.
Yes, it ended up
So,
making sense, but
when you look at players like Antonio Gibson, I think he played every game last year. Or no, Zeke's a better comparison. Zeke played every game last season and finished as RB7, I
yeah,
believe.
it's just more of saying
Or
the way
9.
it makes sense with the way Connor ended the season, but he didn't have higher than 20 fantasy points until week 9, so he just kind of he was just kind of a touchdown vulture up until that point, and then Edmonds got injured and he took
Yeah.
over. So that's what you hope for this next season now that Edmonds is gone.
The very top, yeah. I have 5 guys in elite ahead of him, and he's my first RB1. My thing with it is, it's for him. He has never played a full season, and there's no doubt that he is a talented running back. But I think if you want to go ahead and throw Alexander Madison into the stash or handcuff section, because I mean that's definitely where he belongs, and he's the top of that list for us. I want to say that's the case for you as well, and I think so. Alexander Madison will likely be on a new team next season. He could find himself in a similar situation as Kareem Hunt next season, as in being the lead back for another team. I think that'll be interesting to see because that'll be the real proving point where we'll see if it's system based or all about talent. But for me, Dalvin's a little too risky to categorize in elite. And I know that that's kind of contradictory when I have Christian McCaffrey in elite.
So next up we have A.J. Dillon, who I have... where do I have A.J. Dillon? I have him as a flex.
Yeah.
At the top
And I
of
do
my
too.
flex, actually. Okay, so we agree on that. And
Yeah.
so you have him probably just below Hunt. I have him just above Hunt.
No, because I have Hunt as an RB2
Oh.
on my list.
That is true.
So-
Okay, I'll put him just below Hunt on flex. And I think what we like about A.J. Dillon, I'm sure that we agree on, is just the opportunity of this offense probably focusing more on Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon just because of the lack of receivers. So I think that, and we could talk about Aaron Jones next, but Aaron Jones has gotten a lot of targets in games that Devontae Adams has been out, and now that's going to be their new future. And I think that doesn't really hurt A.J. Dillon at all because then he'll just get more rushes. So I think that it's going to be more of an ebb and flow between Aaron Jones and Dillon, and don't think of it as like a two-back committee. But obviously you prefer Aaron Jones and his upside because of the receptions, but I do expect A.J. Dillon to still get a lot of rushing yards. Let me check real quick what he ended up with last year. He ended up with 803 rushing yards. So I think he can at least maintain that.
Yeah, and I'll say this: I have him high. I have him technically third on my flex list, so he's right on the edge of if a player like Damian Harris or Devin Singletary kind of fall off of that RB2 status, which is where I have those guys. I think Dillon could slot in as a low end RB2, and just based on how much they're going to get used in this Packers offense, I mean, there's whenever Devontae Adams is not present for Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers' efficiency goes up, and the running backs are more involved in the passing game. So I think it's just bound to happen.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't really want to draft A.J. Dillon as my second running back, but I think you could happily have him as your flex. I think it's a little awkward as like a fantasy owner of Aaron Jones to want to get A.J. Dillon as like a handcuff, because if anything was to happen to Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon's value would skyrocket, but then you kind of feel like you have to start both of them with where you draft him, so it's a little bit awkward, but he does deserve to be starting, and I think that's an easier decision if you don't have both running backs, but maybe you can get away with it with both. It just kind of feels weird to start both running backs on the same offense.
No, I get that. I mean, I think there was a short period where I had Chubb and Hunt last season, and
Yeah, there was.
And I mean, you're right. It was kind of an awkward thing because I remember why. I had them both playing the Ravens before their bye week, and they both combined for like 10 points. It was miserable. So that's kind of the downside of putting all your eggs in one basket there, especially when they are both starting level players. I think the best option for making your fantasy team is just diversifying, obviously, because the more diversity you have, the more opportunity you have for upside.
All right, so we can go ahead and move on to Aaron Jones, because I said we would do that. We both have him as an RB1. Do you like him more than Chubb? I think I do.
I do, yeah. Chubb is my RB12. I've got Saquon ahead of Chubb, and then I have Aaron Jones after. Sorry, I have Aaron Jones higher than I do Saquon and Chubb.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb kind of find themselves in a similar situation, except Aaron Jones is the lead that does receiving work, and Chubb is the lead that does more of the rushing work. So I think just that alone, you have to prefer Jones in PPR.
Yeah.
So I think that's what differentiates them for me.
I've got Jones as my running back 9 for this season, and I believe he finished 10th last year. So I expect a little bit of an uptick in usage in the passing game, as we've talked about. But he kind of, I think, especially with A.J. Dillon present, he lacks the upside of a top 5 finish.
I agree, for sure. We can move on to J.K. Dobbins, who I believe we both have as a flex. And real quick, I'll move A.J. Dillon behind Cam Akers. I think we agree on that.
Yeah.
Although I think you have to, but
happens. He's the starting running back compared to the number 2. So, it makes sense for Akers to be ahead in that system.
Okay, so as I said, Dobbins in flex. I think there are a lot of question marks. One in how is he going to be after his injury, which I don't even remember what his injury was. Was it ACL or Achilles? I don't even remember which it was. But
it was one of the two, yeah.
Probably mixing up other players, but either way, not a great injury.
That's a very easy thing to do with how common those injuries are.
Yeah, and I know that he has said things about he'll be ready week 1. I think even against our boy Adam Schefter, I think said that it was one analyst dispelling doubt about if he could start the season, and then he just went on social media saying, I'm definitely starting week 1, but that's still up in the air, so it's like, okay, don't know if we really believe that. And then when he gets there, it's like, this is still Lamar's offense, so it definitely limits his upside.
He's the starting running back, right, Carson?
That's the joke, but there is some truth to it. I mean, there's just not going to be a running back in that offense with 1,000 rushing yards with Lamar on the team. There just won't be.
Maybe Kareem Hunt next year.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
But either way, that would be cool too because it would be in division. But no, I'll say this. I think that J.K. Dobbins, so he's the top of my flex rankings, and there's plenty of upside, but I am not taking him as my second running back. He has to be my third running back if I'm drafting him.
Yeah.
Because there's risk associated with, just like Cam Akers, coming off of a major injury, not having a lot of playing time at the professional level. It's just kind of a lot of the same arguments for Cam Akers, but with J.K. Dobbins.
Agreed. Let's, I guess, move on to Chase Edmonds, who I really like at his ADP. I think we both have him as a flex, so I'll just go ahead and he's probably at the bottom of our flex with the current people there. But I do really like him in this offense. He is the highest paid in that backfield, which they got a lot of different running backs in that backfield now. Raheem Mostert, I think, is currently the number 2 behind him, but he is received a significantly higher salary. And Sony Michel. And then there's still Myles Gaskin. So, yeah, it's kind of a crazy backfield, but I think what makes you have to feel good about Edmonds is that he's getting significantly paid much more than all of the other running backs they signed. And Mostert's currently at the 2, running back 2 on the depth chart, which would hurt Edmonds' value for sure, but who knows how healthy Chase Edmonds can stay. And I think that, Raheem Mostert.
Yeah.
And if Mostert was to go down, I think that Edmonds' value definitely goes up even higher. But even regardless of that, I think Edmonds still has value. I mean, we saw what he was like with Connor there. I mean, they preferred Edmonds over Connor whenever they were both healthy. Connor got a lot of the goal line looks, but they were happy to give Edmonds a lot of those opportunities. And if I'm not mistaken, he's still pretty young.
The pass catching guy. I think in Miami's offense, he's going to kind of maintain that role that he had in Arizona.
Yeah.
He's just not built like a 3-down running back. It's
he's 5'9". I just pulled
right.
that up.
Yeah,
but he is 26, so he is still on the younger end. But I agree, they have to put some people around him. But I still think that he is a great value as overall ADP 92. I think that's really good value for potentially getting a lead to a backfield. That's kind of hard to find in that range of ADP. All right, so we can move on to a guy I don't really want to talk about, honestly, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I know you had him on your roster for most of the year last year.
Yeah,
low-end flex play. Yeah, I mean, I never really thought he was going to be... You love the offense, but he's 5'8", so a lot of our things we're saying about Edmonds are going to cross-apply to Clyde. You can't expect him to be a 3-down back, especially in a passing offense, which maybe the offense changes a bit with the loss of Tyreek Hill, but I don't expect this to ever be a run-heavy offense with Patrick Mahomes, and he's not built like a 3-down back anyways.
Yeah, we need to really stop trying to make CEH be a thing, because he's just not the guy.
He's not.
I think Jerick McKinnon is going to take away touches from him, which is kind of crazy to think because, Jerick McKinnon's been just bouncing around rosters for the past few years.
Yep.
But yeah, Clyde at his ADP, A.J. Dillon's going right around him. I like A.J. Dillon way more.
Yes.
So, yeah, Clyde's not the guy, and it's sad because traditionally a Kansas City running back has always been like a borderline RB1, like with you go back to Jamal Charles or players like that. I mean, especially with an Andy Reid led offense, LaShawn McCoy. But these are players that are way in the past relative to these guys now, and yeah, Clyde's just a low end flex. I'm not trusting him until I see him change this season.
Yeah, I mean, if he's had his rookie season 13 games played, second season last year 10 games played, so maybe if you can get a full healthy season, it can be better. He did have 800 rushing yards this rookie season, so there definitely is potential, but I've seen people say Ronald Jones could take over, and he's not even listed as the top 3 of the depth chart right now.
And I've read reports that Ronald Jones isn't even going to make the team. So.
Yeah, so I just I don't even... And then this Isaiah Pacheco, I think is a rookie. I see him being like, oh, he's going to take over. Like, how can you like Clyde whenever every other person that's even graced the depth chart has been talked about? Like,
that's not a good sign.
No, it's not. It just isn't. And yeah, so... I don't think you can't go as low as Stash. You're close, but I think just by definition he can't be that low.
He's my very last flex.
So, and that's where I threw him, and I had him higher, but I'm nothing personal CH, but I'm fine of being on the CH hate train. Okay, we can move on to Austin Eckler, who I have at elite, and I think you have as an RB1. So I guess I can try and make my case.
Yeah, go for it.
Although, honestly, if I'm at the 3 spot in a draft and McCaffrey and Taylor are already gone, I am going to be doing a lot of thinking. Even though
you
currently...
do a lot of thinking at every draft pick that you
I do.
You'll get to see that whenever we do our mock draft video coming up pretty soon.
This is what I love about Austin Eckler. So he's kind of every other season has had a full season, so that's kind of bad timing. Is bound to not have that if it follows that trend.
Sure.
But he finished as RB2 last year. He had a career-high 911 rushing yards by a ton. His next highest season in his career was 557, so a over 350-yard difference.
Yeah.
And but that was the year he had his most receptions. But he still had 70 receptions this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what is a negative for Austin Eckler is he's going to have some negative regression on receiving touchdowns. I just don't expect him to have 8 receiving touchdowns again. But I think you do feel great about him having 12 rushing touchdowns last year, because before last season, his highest career rushing touchdown season was 3. So he definitely learned how to rush the ball. And he still has that receiving upside that I think just gives him an incredibly safe floor. And that's why I have him at elite. I don't expect him to be the RB1. I mean, injuries always could make that happen, but I think that he's a lock at top 6 because of his floor.
Yeah, and it's important to note you have 6 players in your elite category, so I have 5. That's why he falls to RB1 for me. Um, but I think there's a variety of things that are going to lead to his regression this season. One of them being his age. I think, what is he, 28
Yes.
now?
Either 27 or 28. I'll pull it up.
Okay.
27.
Okay. So it's getting up there in age with running backs. And he himself has said he wants to be used less on offense.
Yeah.
He's not getting snaps on defense. But what I mean is that he wants less touches, basically, for his health. So I think that's going to be something that comes into play and keeps him out of that elite category for me personally. Isaiah Spiller could. I think he's kind of a bigger back, especially compared to Eckler.
Let's see. Yeah, he's 6'1", whereas Eckler's 5'10".
And probably some more weight on him too.
Yes, 225, 6'1", and 200, 5'10". So Spiller's definitely built like a
goal line running back.
Yes, which could definitely take some from him.
Yeah,
from
I just think between Eckler wanting less touches in general and the incoming rookie, I think he's probably going to realistically finish more like in the 6 to 8 range, which is about right where I have him.
Yeah, I think he's still a very safe pick, but if you're drafting him as the 4th running back,
especially in PPR, don't get me wrong. In
better.
PPR, he's a very solid player and someone you'd be happy to get coming out of the first round.
He's agreed. So, but you have him just below Dalvin Cook in RB1. Is that what you have him as?
Yeah, I actually have him as my running back 8. So he's ahead of Aaron Jones and behind Dalvin.
Yeah, and as you all can see, I kind of I'm on the edge with a lot of these players already, so I a lot of the time switch to Blake's just because.
I'll push back. I'll push back for your sake because you have him as your 4th running back in elite. So,
yep.
Did you consider ranking them in that category?
I think that is also his ADP. I think that I'd be happy to take him there just because of how safe his floor is. I think that's why I had him there. But at the end of the day, like I said, if I'm the 3rd person in the draft and McCaffrey and Taylor are gone, I'm going to do some thinking because of all the reasons you explained. I think you can also spin the whole want less touches into a positive because that could mean it's less likely he'll get an injury. And every year that he has had, every year that he's had 16 games other than his rookie season, in 2019, 16 games, RB4 in PPR. Last year, 16 games, RB2 in PPR. So I think that could also be a positive, but really, we don't know if he's going to be elite, but we know he's going to be a very good RB1. And I think that's what keeps him as a safe floor. So yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
that's enough
I'm
for
not
me.
I'm not trying to bully your list or anything.
I know, but Blake had already described it in mock drafts. I do take a lot of the clock because
you're
sometimes
always thinking about it.
I'm always thinking about it. I overthink. A lot of different things, but I always end up feel like I do pretty well. So, yeah, elite and RB1. It's a little trivial, but we can throw him in RB1. But he's on the top end of that for sure.
Okay.
In my eyes, we can move on to Ezekiel Elliott, who we both have as an RB2. Yep. After Breece Hall. And
according to right now, but I think once we continue, I have him as my 3rd RB2, making him running back 15.
Yeah.
I have him ahead of James Conner actually, but I could really go either way on that one, especially with how we've talked about Conner's usage and compared to who had Tony Pollard nipping at Zeke's heels.
Yep.
I would probably honestly lean more towards Conner, but it's close. Those two are very. They're right next to each other in my rankings. I could see either one being a good option, especially a solid RB2. So
I think both of them are safe RB2s. I think they just have to be. At the end of the day, you are nervous about what Tony Pollard can do to Zeke's fantasy value, and if he just still has tread on his tires. I mean, he's been almost every single season of his 6-season career, he's been extremely close to 1,000 rushing yards or higher. The 2 times he didn't do it, he was high 900. So he has a very safe rushing floor, and he does get a lot of receptions. He does get goal line work. It's just about what Tony Pollard could do to his value. And Zeke has stayed healthy pretty much his entire career. But honestly, last season, that kind of hurt his value because they just limited his workload rather than just resting him. So, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to argue RB1. I don't think anyone's going to argue flex. So I think he is just a safe RB2. That you just have to... You got to remember that he was in the first round easily last season. So don't fade him too hard. But I think that he is kind of nearing the decline of his career potentially. I agree. I agree. All right, we can move on to Travis Etienne, who I have right next to Breece Hall, but right below him. But for me, it could go either way. I think for a lot of the same reasons. I know that Etienne isn't technically a rookie, but it's going to be his first year playing in the regular season. So effectively, in fantasy purposes, he's a rookie. And also out of Clemson, just like Trevor Lawrence, so they have a prior connection. What makes me a little bit nervous is if James Robinson's just going to be completely phased out of this offense. I think that they're going to lean for sure on Etienne as their RB1. And I know that, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm not really a college football fan, he really was a great receiving back, so I think that's great for fantasy. And again, he's not really like the 3-down back build, but just because of PPR, I think you have to feel pretty good with him as an RB2. And if you can get him as your third running back, that's amazing. Like that. This is how I feel. Cam Akers, I do not want unless he's my third running back, and even then, it's like I'm not super excited. Travis Etienne is my third running back. I'm excited about.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you can definitely. If you reach on your second running back and get Etienne, I think you feel a little nervous about that just because he is unproven at the NFL level. But, I mean, for all the reasons you said, there's a lot to like for his PPR upside. And for that reason, I think he's a solid kind of, middle-of-the-road RB2.
Yeah, I feel like Breece Hall and Travis Etienne are the best third running backs you could get for your team, just for... limiting the risk because they're your third running back, but also because of their ceilings. So if they're there...
So you like them ahead of Connor or Zeke? Because you can definitely get either of those if you're at the turn.
It definitely depends on how I feel about my first two running backs. But I would like to just take that upside as for my third running back.
I like that.
I think that makes you feel better. But obviously all of those are good options for Connor, and Zeke should be more safe. But I think that their ceiling and floor are kind of close together, whereas Etienne and Breece Hall could have very high ceilings, given the opportunity.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, we can move on to Leonard Fournette, who Blake, I think, loves in mock drafts. And I think that his ADP is too low. I think a lot of people were overreacting to what he weighed in, like day one of training camp.
He's already lost the weight.
He's already lost the weight.
Noise. Yes,
and now I see 8 days ago, Leonard Fournette has been a camp standout. So it's like, don't listen to that. The concern with him is that like he's had some injury problems before in his career. He's never had a 16-game season. And I know that they did draft Rashad.
Just think of how high you could finish if you did, though.
I know, but that's what keeps him as a RB1 for sure, around RB1. Yes. And then they did draft Rashad White, who, again, don't have a ton of college knowledge, but I'm pretty sure he was a really good receiving back.
But I don't expect
it to.
So was Giovanni Bernard. We don't care about that.
I get it, but I'm just saying, like, there is another person in that backfield, but my point is I don't expect it to chip into Fournette's value enough to where he falls a tier.
Playoff Lenny is Tom Brady's guy. You see the birthday cake that Leonard Fournette got Tom Brady?
No, I didn't.
It was a goat-shaped cake.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So they're good friends. It's great that Tom Brady's back on the offense. It's going to mean that all the players on the Buccaneers' value goes up, including Leonard Fournette, who I have ranked as my RB7.
I cannot put him ahead of Eckler. I cannot. So
okay, for the sake of the video, I'll let you. But I think that I feel better taking Fournette season long than Eckler personally.
I don't think that if we look back on this, I'm not going to say it's impossible,
He
but
had
I would
70 catches last year, and he can rush for over 1,000 yards.
I'm not saying it's impossible. We look back on the season and it happens, but I would just never do it. I don't think he would ever have the situation to do it. I mean, Eckler's ADP is 4 overall, whereas Fournette is 25. You're not taking Fournette at the 4th spot. You're not. So if you prefer his value, I think you could argue his value is better, for sure.
I mean, that's why he's such a value in drafts, though, because I rank him ahead of that, and I can get him. I can have both if I really want to. That's a potential possibility.
Yeah,
at where he's going in drafts right now.
I think that would be great to have those two running backs. But let's move on to a less exciting conversation, in my opinion, and talk about Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, so he was an example of a player that stayed healthy, although played through injury all last season, and finished high enough. Like, I think he finished as running back 21, I want to say, in PPR scoring. You can double check
Actually,
that. Actually,
12.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, a little dyslexia moment there. But that is a symptom of playing every game in an NFL season. It's just, players like, when Christian McCaffrey was early in his career and he played every game of every season, that's an outlier. And the fact that injuries have caught up with him is unfortunate. But the point is, if you play every single NFL game, you're likely going to finish high among running backs because there is just so much injury risk in that field.
For sure. I think with Antonio Gibson, what concerns me is J.D. McKissic taking a lot of receptions, which, I mean, Gibson does get a decent amount of receptions. He's never been the pass catcher.
But he's in a very awkward spot. They drafted Brian Robinson, who is more like a bruising running back. I wouldn't be surprised if he got some goal line carries.
That's another thing I'm reading, which worries me about Gibson's value. It's almost looking like it could be a 3-headed monster. Like every drive could involve all 3 of them. And
yeah, certainly.
I have him as a flex. You have him as an RB2. I don't feel good with him as my RB2. I just don't.
I don't either. He's low on the RB2, but I also just think that he has a realistic possibility to finish inside the top 24. You just said he finished 12th last year. Yeah. So I can't drop him all the way out to flex category whenever he does consistently finish well. I mean, he stays healthy and he does get used on the Commanders, but he's just not a player that I'm excited about and a player that I'm not interested in really drafting.
When you say it like that, top 24, I think he does have to make RB2, and I know that's just how it works, but yeah, gross. Bottom of RB2 for me currently, with how it currently stands. But we can move on to Melvin Gordon. You have him at the bottom of your flex.
I do.
And I have him also in my flex. Or I have him literally at the bottom of my flex. You have him near the bottom of the flex.
Yes, I've got the only players below him on flex for me are Miles Sanders and CEH. And here's the reason why. Everyone's expecting Javonte Williams to take the next step in his second year. He's going to likely operate under a 60-40, maybe a 70-30 if it's really good split in favor of Williams. And with a Russell Wilson-led Broncos team, I think that we can go ahead and throw Javonte up there. I mean, you have him. We both have him as an RB2. I think that's safe. I think that's reasonable. He is actually the top of my RB2 just based on who else is in that category. But we're expecting regression for Ingram because he's going from a 50-50 split to a much lower percentage. So I think it just makes sense that he may actually fall out of flex category at some point this season and just become a handcuff. We'll have to see how the Broncos want to use that backfield.
I feel like Melvin Gordon's value is definitely only going to decrease, but with just how he was last year, it could start similarly. But
unless injury, of course.
Yes. I think that he's definitely worth... If you can grab him and you have Javonte Williams, I think he's definitely worth grabbing. I don't. You're never gonna really want to start both of them, and I don't think you'd ever.
It's
kind of
like the Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon thing.
It's slightly better with ADP for Gordon. I don't think you feel like you
Agreed.
have to start Gordon.
No, agreed there.
But he definitely has value, but Javonte Williams is looking legit, so I think you have to assume that he's just going to eat up more and more of Gordon's touches as the season goes on. And as a Broncos fan, I'm excited about it. I think that he will be very, very good, and I'm excited about it.
You definitely have a good young running back on your team.
For sure. Okay, we can move on to Damian Harris, your favorite team, and we kind of disagree here. But I think that top 24 is, again, fair. So
yeah, I think if you consider where he finished last year, just like with Antonio Gibson, I don't see how you can say that he's not going to finish in the top 24.
I'll go ahead and... Do you like him more or less than Gibson?
I like him less.
Okay.
Damian Harris is my last RB2, so he's my running back 24.
I think that's fair.
He's right on the edge. I think he honestly, realistically, for the whole season, I think one of these top guys at flex, either between Dobbins, Akers, or Dillon, or even Edmonds, they could all jump ahead of Damian Harris to finish as a top 24 running back.
Yeah.
But that's where I have him going into the season.
What really worries me about Damian Harris is Ramondre Stevenson's role. And I see something right here 3 days ago. Pats reportedly taking calls for Damian Harris. I don't think that's actually going to go to anything as far as a trade. But I do expect a negative touchdown regression with where he had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. I just do. I mean, in the last 3 regular season games, he had 6 rushing touchdowns. Come on. It's just not going to... I just don't see that happening.
But the Patriots run the ball a lot.
They do. But I think that... I am hearing a lot of great things about Ramondre Stevenson, and that worries me about Damian Harris. I'd much rather take Ramondre Stevenson later on than Damian Harris personally, but yeah.
With ADP, I get that. I think that based on ADP that you feel better about Harris being your third running back than your second, but I think he's just right on the edge of that category for me. With what he did last year, I think it's hard to bump him down in favor of someone else that we've talked about already.
Yeah, I'm looking at this Week 17 game where Damian Harris had 2 rushing touchdowns on 35 yards, and Ramondre Stevenson had 107 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So yes, they do like to rush the ball into the end zone. And I know I'm just cherry picking one game near the end of the season, but it just worries me about how dependent Damian Harris could be on touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that neither one of them are great pass catchers. So
yeah,
I think, with the recent retirement of James White, that role in that offense is open, and it really depends on who takes the next step. I think Stevenson has a better chance to be more of that pass catching role.
Yeah.
But there's also, the rookie Pierre Strong has shown great prowess in pass protection, and that's what allows you to get on the field usually in third down situations. So it's I'll tell you right now, as a Patriots fan, don't draft any Patriots. It's a good real life team and not a very good fantasy team.
Bill doesn't play fantasy, I don't think.
Bill doesn't play fantasy, and that's okay because it's not his job. His job is to be the best coach ever. So whatever. But yeah, I think Harris has an opportunity to finish top 24. He did it last year, and I think I like him in terms of his usage ahead of guys that I just have more question marks about. So that's where I'm leaving him at RB2 for the sake of the video. If you feel like putting him in flex, I'm not going to make a big fit.
I have him at the end of RB2 for now because I think top 24 probably is safe. But I'll go ahead and throw... For me, Ramondre Stevenson is at near the very, very, very top of stash.
Okay.
I have him at the very top. I think that... again, this is kind of trivial, but yeah, I'll just put him near the top. I'm putting him at the top of stash, and I don't think we're going to have much of an argument there. I know that you have Alexander Mattison.
More than Madison?
Or no, you don't. But I just think that there's a reality where Ramondre Stevenson could potentially take more carries, and that there's just not a reality there for Madison. Madison is solely a handcuff.
Where do you see if Harris isn't hurt? Where do you see Stevenson takes the role from him? I'm just curious.
I don't think he fully takes the role
that.
from him, but like it could definitely be a 60-40. It definitely could. Like it's not impossible for that.
I'd be a little surprised if injury doesn't play a factor. I think Harris is the guy there.
Okay, but we can agree that Madison only has value if Dalvin Cook gets injured.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, so for that reason, but again, I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm really high on Stevenson for his ADP, but at the end of the day, Who knows if that backfield? That's really the moral of the story.
That's definitely the truth.
Okay, so we can move on to Najee, which you have him as elite. I have him as RB1. I've been taking him ahead of Dalvin Cook in almost every single draft, but my rankings just didn't show that just now. I think what kind of changed that for me, and I think I'll end up being okay with him at elite just because of the opportunity. But what worries me about Najee, and I know it was his rookie season where he finished as RB3, but
efficiency.
It is efficiency. I think it's hard for me to put a running back in elite who has 3.91 yards per carry on 307 touches.
That's only 0.1 below 4, and if you do 4 3 times in a row, that's a first down.
There, math is there. There is the math.
Yeah.
But
I mean, well, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, he is extremely young. I think he's 22 years old, and are you worried about Benny Snell taking touches away from him?
I'm not really worried about another running back. I'm worried about, he had 74 receptions on 94 targets. Now, you don't like these quarterbacks coming in, so maybe they will just check down like Big Ben did. But, I mean, you got Deontay, you got Claypool, you got Pickens, Freiermuth. It's like, I don't know how much I expect him to really go up on those receptions, and he doesn't need to go up, of course, because...
No, but that's that's an insanely high, bar that he's set for himself. If there is some regression in the passing game, I think that's honestly to be expected. But the fact that he has the ability to bring you a 70 reception season, or thereabouts, that is elite in PPR scoring. I mean, you can't deny that.
It is for sure. I just worry about efficiency. But just looking at this right now, it's possible he had the most touches in the league. Like, looking at this, 307 rushing attempts, 74 receptions. I'm sure that's near the very, very top. And since it's only his second season, I don't think you have to start worrying about him running into the McCaffrey dilemma as far as being overworked. But
no,
that's fine. Elite. I just worry about his efficiency. But on fantasy purposes, I need to look away from efficiency because there's a reason why we rank Jalen Hurts as a QB1 in fantasy, because he's a great fantasy player.
Talent and opportunity are the number 2 or the top 2 factors in fantasy performance. So Najee has both.
Yep, and I probably will. Who knows? My rankings can change up halfway through my clock whenever I'm on the clock. So yeah, we can move on to Darrell Henderson, who we both have as a stash / handcuff.
We talked about him when we were going over Cam Akers, but it's okay. We'll just revisit it briefly. I mean, I don't think that Cam Akers has the body to be an every down back, and with how Darrell Henderson performed last season in Cam Akers' absence, you can't expect him to just completely disappear in this offense.
Yeah, he was like a very safe RB2 last year.
Yeah, he was solid. I would say top 16 about. He was definitely solid, and I don't expect that to repeat this year if Cam Akers stays healthy, but the reality is that he will be involved. He will be taking touches from Akers, and that's why he has to be a stash.
Yeah, and I just read something that Sean McVay views Akers and Henderson as having 2 starting running backs, was the quote. So I think that alone makes it to where you gotta draft Henderson near the end of drafts, just because of the handcuff possibility, and if Akers just does not recover from this injury or gets injured again from something else, I think Henderson is proven to have value.
Yeah.
All right, we can move on to Derrick Henry, elite. I'm trying to remember where you had him in elite.
I've got him as my 3rd running back, and that's kind of with an asterisk because you know, we'll get to him very shortly. I think we go ahead and talk about him too after this, but I have Alvin Kamara as my 5th elite running back, and I think he would be higher if there wasn't the potential looming suspension for his activities over Pro Bowl weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have Derrick Henry as my RB3 ahead of Najee, just because he's just King Henry. He's built different. He's coming off of a foot injury, but I honestly think that, I mean, like I said in the quarterback video last week, the Tennessee Titans are going to be 10 guys just blocking and or handing the ball off to Derrick Henry. So the talent is there, the opportunity is there. I think you have to, and he's had several top 5, top 3 finishes in his career. I don't see how he falls out of elite this season.
I don't think he can fall out of elite this season. I think you do worry a little bit about if he still has it left in the tank. I mean, we're talking about a running back who had 2,000 rushing yards 2 years ago. So I think that alone makes him elite until a season proves otherwise. Last year
he was on pace.
8 games.
He was on pace to crush that last year.
Yeah, 8 games almost hit 1,000 rushing yards. So you do worry about if there's still tread on the tires, but he just probably is the best rusher in the league.
Yeah.
So elite. So I guess we can talk about Kamara.
Yeah, let's go ahead and throw Kamara up there.
I have Kamara as my RB3, and I think now I'm starting to read a lot of things because of the postponement of his court date. It might not take into effect until the 2023 NFL season, and if I think more reports come out in the next few weeks that seems like the case,
his ADP is going to skyrocket.
It's going to skyrocket. Right now, he is a league winner at his ADP because personally, if you didn't have the looming suspension, I think he's clearly the RB3 in my eyes, just because of his versatility as a rusher and pass catcher. I mean, did he put up a... Here, I'm not going to say this until I check real quick, so let me just stall real quick. Currently ADP 21 overall, so yeah, that's just ridiculous. Okay, no, he hasn't had an 1,000 yard season with rushing and receiving, but he's been pretty close. And I think that, for me, makes me feel really, really, really good about him. And he hasn't had a season that it's been like injury struck, and he has had injuries, of course, but you're not really worried about that with Kamara.
He's never finished worse than 9th. So,
yeah,
I mean, talk about reliable and consistent. I think that, he belongs in elite very, very comfortably.
And I'm really starting to feel like this suspension is not going to take into effect this season. It does make it... It's not great that if it does happen this season, it's going to probably be late in the season, which really hurts fantasy managers. But I think in terms of hoping that you can disregard that because of the postponement and what a lot of reports are saying now, for me, he's just my RB3. If you're not taking into account what that could do to his value, or that guessing game, I guess is really all we can do right now.
And I agree with that. My rank reflects the baked-in risk of him being suspended later in the year, and that's why he's my 5th running back. But I mean, if that doesn't tell you that he is a very, very, very good option, even with that in consideration, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, and we'll move on right now. I think very quickly talk about Hines. We both have him as stash, I'm sure. I don't even need to check, but I do see reports about him. The head coaches want him to have 60 receptions or even be in the top 3 receiving leaders with receptions, and I don't know if I really see that happening. He's not going to hurt Jonathan Taylor's value. Yeah,
among running backs or all players?
No, running backs.
Oh, okay, maybe.
And it is surprising to me to see how many receptions he has had in previous seasons. He's had higher than 60 receptions twice in his career. But again, he's only going to be a stash because he has no value if Taylor's there. But if Taylor gets injured, I think Hines becomes a really appealing fantasy option, and I think becomes a very safe flex at that point, at the very least, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he's very similar to J.D. McKissick, who I also have as a stash. We should go ahead and throw him up there.
I'll throw him up there.
But I mean, it's just kind of, they're the clear pass catching back on a kind of just so-so maybe slightly below average offense. So there's not a ton of upside there. You can't start the season with them in your flex. They're going to be a depth position on your team, so things could change, but I feel like going into the season, they're both stashes.
All right, let's move on to Josh Jacobs, RB2.
Yeah, Hall of Fame game starter.
God, that is alarming. If you are unaware that is alarming, that is alarming that he would play that much in a preseason game.
Meaningless preseason, yeah.
But
I think part of it is that Josh McDaniels is coming in and just, as the new head coach, coming from the Patriots system of running back by committee, I think he's just getting a feel for what everyone can do. And I believe Josh Jacobs in his last year on his contract. I might be off on that. I'm not the best
I think
with
that's
contracts.
true. I think that's true.
But, it might also be signaling that this guy is not untouchable in terms of other teams making a call for him. So
yeah, I'm seeing right here Josh Jacobs is not actively being shopped for a trade, but just the fact that they're even talking about it,
Yeah. So I have him as a low-end RB2, personally. I've got him as RB21.
I currently just threw him ahead of Gibson, personally. But
see, I have him one spot behind Gibson because I think Gibson's more likely to keep that starting job, whereas I think that with Josh McDaniels coming in, it's going to be a committee with the rookie.
Yeah, honestly, hearing that, I didn't know he came from the Patriots, so just hearing that is enough to convince me on that.
Yeah, it's not looking good in Vegas, but
no, they don't even learn their running back names; they just refer to them by their numbers at the Patriots. I feel like they're just a group of running backs is basically what they're
just numbers.
Yep. Yeah, but he has to be an RB2. He's never finished below top 24. I think you have to feel like that won't happen.
Just limited upside given the new coaching staff and the players around him.
Yeah. Does not have RB1 upside, whereas some of these players on RB2 do. So we can move on to Ronald Jones. Stash.
He may not even make the team, so this might be just a courtesy to have him on this list to begin with, because it's a little surprising to me that he couldn't make the roster. There were reports saying that he's, kind of on that bubble, which surprises me. But I wasn't all too impressed with him when he was on the Buccaneers. I just think,
he completely lost his role last season. And going into drafts last year, it was like, which running back do we pick? Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette? Like, that was sort of a discussion. Yeah. So that's crazy.
It was a debate. It was a debate just a year ago. He doesn't have a ton of competition ahead of him on the Chiefs. Like, we're both low on CEH, so maybe he takes that lead role, but we don't really know what that looks like anyway in a Patrick Mahomes-led offense. So
yeah,
he's a stash for right
now. Move on to Marlon Mack, also a stash. Yep. Nothing else to say there. He doesn't have any upside. The only one on that team that has upside, I guess, has to be Dameon Pierce, because maybe a rookie can just do something. But that's really the best you can even hope for.
It was a crowded backfield last season. It was a crowded backfield last season when there were Rex Burkhead and David Johnson and
Mark Ingram.
Philip Lindsay. I mean, there was a long list of players on that team, and nobody stood out. So the idea that Marlon Mack is going to come and make a name for himself on that team specifically, it seems unlikely. Did you go ahead and throw Dameon Pierce up there?
Yeah, I did. I threw him in as a stash. So
yeah, so agreed
just
there.
Quickly checking to make sure I did the right player, because don't watch college football and they just have their combine pictures. I'm just being transparent.
The one with the big forehead and the dreads.
Yeah, I got him up there. Okay, we can move on to McCaffrey, who I've sort of had a change of heart. I almost feel like you could draft him at RB1, and a lot of people are saying that, but I almost feel like I didn't think I would ever do that, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's a discussion. Regardless, it's 1 or 2, so
He is arguably the most talented running back when healthy.
I believe I read that in games he's finished, has the highest average fantasy points ever.
That doesn't surprise me. He does it all. When he's healthy on the field, he does it all. And, you know, if he stays healthy, I think he has a really good chance to finish inside the top 5. I have him personally ranked as 2. You have him as 1. So we feel really strong about him. We're just, we're crossing our fingers hoping that he stays healthy this year.
It's about the risk for sure, because
the Panthers and the game itself are just better when Christian McCaffrey's playing.
For sure. But let me just say something real quick, because I've been taking Taylor at the 1 in mock drafts just because it feels much safer. Obviously, you can never predict injuries, but Taylor finished as RB1 last year in position rank with 369 PPR points. I think and then I look at McCaffrey, 2019, 470 fantasy points. 470. 100 more than a season's RB1.
We do have to keep in mind, though, that Taylor had a very slow start. He had a very strong finish to last season. So,
but even Derrick Henry's 2,000-yard rushing season, which isn't very surprising because of PPR, that's 330 in PPR.
Yeah. There's no denying that Christian McCaffrey, in terms of being a pass-catching running back, definitely has the most upside of anyone in the league right now.
You just worry about the health, but as far as he's RB1 or RB2 in drafts, and I think that if you just are of the mindset that, hey, anyone could get injured, I'm just going for the upside, you take McCaffrey. If you want to feel like a little bit safer with the first overall pick, take Taylor. That's really, it's going to be your mindset of how you wake up that morning, honestly, is how I'm starting to feel at this point.
Yeah.
So we can go ahead and throw up Taylor. I'm putting him at the 2, but again, very interchangeable. They're both top 2 elite going into drafts.
Yeah, agreed there.
All right, we can now move on to Elijah Mitchell, who I think's ADP is way too low, personally. I think everyone's getting scared from the fact that it is the 49ers backfield, but I think he's a very, very safe RB2, and I think he's got a great ADP. I'm personally throwing him ahead of Gibson, but I've been hating on Gibson all video, so I don't know if that means a whole lot.
So I have him in the middle of my flex category, and that might be our biggest discrepancy among the players remaining. Gibson just doesn't catch any passes. Like in standard leagues, I can totally see where you're coming from. Yeah, who did I say?
You said Gibson, but...
Yeah, sorry. Mitchell doesn't catch any passes. I mean, Gibson doesn't either, really, but that's besides the point. I just feel like, where did Mitchell finish last season?
How do I lighten this load? He played 11 games, so he had some injuries, but he finished 26 in PPR.
Okay, so I mean, right outside the RB2 range. Yeah. I could certainly see if he's healthy this year that he finds himself in that RB2 category. Like I said before, I see players like Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs kind of falling out of that range, so there's room for Mitchell to take that spot, certainly.
Mitchell is still someone I think I would like to have as my RB3 much more than RB2, so he still is low-end RB2 if anything for me, but I just do like the look of five out of those 11 games he had over 100 rushing yards. Now, he almost needs to do that because of receptions, so that's what kind of makes it difficult. But, I'm reading a lot of reports that are like, this seems like their guy, which always they've switched up their running back, so I would like to put him at the back of RB2.
That's fine. I think that's fair.
Okay.
I'm not really drafting him in any of the mocks that I'm doing, so I'm a little bit more fade on that player, but I totally see where you're coming from. If he stays healthy, he's got plenty of upside as a rusher, at least. Kind of like a Nick Chubb, but much less elite at rushing.
Yeah, for sure. We can move on to Nixon, who I think safe RB1. Where do you have him in relation to the players?
I actually have him ranked as running back 10 on my board.
Okay. So just behind Aaron Jones?
I've got him ahead. That's right. I've got him ahead of Barkley and Chubb, and behind Aaron Jones and Eckler. So that's right where I have him.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a whole lot of explanation needed. He's not elite necessarily. He's definitely RB1 though. That we saw this offense do very well with all of their paces finally working together. This finally a good Bengals team. I think that it seems like it's going to be more of a passing team just because of the outlook of Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and even Tyler Boyd. But Mixon is just...
It's an exciting team. And
he's going to be very safe, low-end RB1.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so we can go ahead and move on to David Montgomery, who I have near the end of my RB2, kind of in the middle. You pretty much have him in the same exact spot. So
yeah,
I'll go ahead and throw him right in front of Gibson, because that's where you have him, and I agree with that. I think that, you worry a little bit about, if Justin Fields takes off literally and just starts running a lot, what that could do to David Montgomery. But, people that are worried about Khalil Herbert because of how he did without Montgomery shouldn't, just because of how Alexander Mattison is. You shouldn't worry about Montgomery losing like that lead role.
I don't think he's going to lose the role, but I think it could become more of a committee, because some reports are saying that they want to get Khalil Herbert more involved this year. So I would say he's kind of a low-end RB2, like we have him. And Khalil Herbert's not even on this list, but he's definitely a stash play.
Yes, agreed.
Someone that you should target near the end of your draft to get that handcuff /
especially if you have Montgomery.
Stash.
I think what I like about Montgomery is he's only 25. He's had over 200 rushing attempts each year, and he's kind of fallen around that 50 receptions, so he just has a safe floor. He does. So
yeah, he's solid.
Not a super exciting player to take, but I can't even believe that in 2020 he finished RB4, but that's just because I think at the end of the season he just absolutely went off. Like his last 5 games were over 20, so he definitely has the potential to do that, but I don't think you love this offense, so that limits him to, but RB2. Yeah. Cordell Patterson, who has been a very difficult person for me to decide if I want to take in drafts or where to rank, but we both have him as a flex. It's just hard to get behind the idea that last year wasn't completely a fluke, but he also does have value because of what he did last year. So it's both ends.
I think it's a safe flex because you saw him really fall off once the novelty of him playing running back kind of faded away and reality set in. He did fall off in production in the last month and a half at least of production last year.
Yeah. He's
31 years old. That Falcons team does not look like it's going to be very good at all. And I would not be surprised at all to see, let's go ahead and throw Algier up there.
All right,
as a stash, because I think there's a realistic possibility where Algier becomes the running back and Patterson kind of finds himself back in a slot wide receiver role.
Yeah.
That's kind of what his career has been up to this point. So the fact that he's coming off of a season where he logged more carries than receptions is, I think, maybe a novelty and wearing off at this point. So
and I saw. Sorry, finish what you were saying.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Okay, I saw a report saying that he wants to do kick return work again. So it's how are they going to use him?
If you play in a league where there's kick return, then that maybe ups his value a little bit, but it also increases his risk for injury.
Yeah.
So it's not a good situation. I think when you got him last season off the waivers, more than likely.
Yep.
It was a great addition to your team. This season, where he's going in drafts, it's a lot less enticing to me. So I think he's a flex, and maybe by the end of the year, or even mid-season, he's a lot less relevant.
Yeah, he finished as RB9 last year, but in his last 4 games, he didn't even have higher than 30 rushing yards. So you just worry about him playing as a wide receiver, and then also, but you don't want him to completely do that either. So it's kind of he's an interesting player for sure. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
We can move on to Rashad Penny, who we both have as a flex.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, hey, if injuries did not exist, go ahead.
Yeah, he'd be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, honestly. But what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say in my rankings he's right behind Eli Mitchell, but we hadn't put Mitchell in RB2.
Yeah.
So I think he's a high end flex, but I also think that Kenneth Walker, who should be drafted and is going ahead of Penny in ADP, which is interesting because Penny's still listed as the starter. I just think it's only a matter of time before Penny either gets hurt, misses time, and Walker takes that role, or Walker takes that role early in the season, despite there not being any injuries. I think it's only a matter of time before Kenneth Walker's the lead running back in Seattle. And then even then, it doesn't really feel like that's going to be that valuable of a position, which is why we have Penny as a flex. I mean, it's just not going to be a good team in Seattle. No Russ to soar with the with the Seahawks. He's riding now.
Yeah, he's riding now.
And Drew Lock, Geno Smith. I mean, yikes! Like, it's just not good.
Yeah, and I guess I'll go ahead and throw Kenneth Walker and stash. Doesn't really matter what order necessarily, but the only thing I have to say about Rashad Penny is the fact that they invested in Kenneth Walker shows that they're not super confident in him staying healthy, because he never has. But I just want to bring to everyone's attention that he had 6.29 yards per carry last season whenever he finished off last season. That is incredible.
Yeah, it is.
That is incredible.
Unsustainable, but it is incredible.
My Hall of Famer, if injuries didn't exist, nominee right there, Rashad Penny. All right, we'll move on to Tony Pollard, who I guess is a flex.
Yeah, I have him as flex. You have him as low-end flex. So, I mean, kind of when we were talking about Zeke, we were saying that Pollard might be, eating into his role this season more so than he did even last year. I think that's a realistic possibility. Coming out of drafts, I don't think he can be anything better than a flex, just based on his situation. So, unless you want to, you could certainly make an argument for putting him as a stash player or a handcuff, because he's not very reliably consistent in his current role. But in terms of like season long projections, I think he's going to be a flex play.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. So I'm good just to move on to James Robinson, who is a stash.
Yeah, I've got him as a stash. We just really don't know. Like, his usage over the past couple seasons has been really up and down. And with the recovery of Travis Etienne, I think that's going to make it difficult for James Robinson to get a lot of touches to kind of warrant him being a flex play. I think he's going to become touchdown dependent with the role that he's going to see this year. And for that reason, like, if Etienne gets hurt again, then he kind of bounces into the borderline flex RB2 range. But if Etienne stays healthy, I think it's going to be a hard path to getting out of just being a handcuff for James Robinson.
I agree with that. Move on to Miles Sanders, flex, nearing the end of flex. It's just
a flex, and you don't really feel good about it.
Yeah, but it's just like, it's hard to completely write him off, but because there was no reason for him to have 0 touchdowns last year. There really wasn't.
Right. The Eagles were one of the most rushingest teams in the NFL.
He's a pretty efficient running back. 5.5 yards per carry last year. Doesn't get a ton of receptions, which obviously limits him. He's only 25. And then all of 4 running backs on the Eagles had usage at some point. I mean, a lot of that was due to a Sanders injury nearing the middle of the season. But you just worry about if he could have a clear role. I've seen so many different reports on Sanders on Sleeper. I saw could it be in for a ton of carries. Then I saw unclear if it will be a committee. Then now I see 13 hours ago active as a receiver. It's like, I don't even think they know what they're doing with him. So
yeah, I just, going into drafts, it's a flex.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, Devin Singletary. You have him as an RB2.
I do.
And I don't fully disagree, but Continue,
So
and we'll talk about James Cook, I'm sure,
based
at the same
on
time.
yes, I have James Cook as a flex, and I have Devin Singletary as an RB2. And here's my rationale. Devin Singletary, I mean, okay, so Zach Moss, we can pretty much disregard him as ever being a thing. He was a healthy scratch in multiple games last season. Singletary is definitely their guy in Buffalo. That being said, they drafted James Cook, who has a lot of the physical qualities, a little bit not as built as his older brother, but similar speed, similar physical profile. But I think he's going to take a pass catching approach in this Buffalo offense, and I think that's going to lower Singletary's value season long. So I think it's possible that Singletary falls out of RB2 and becomes a flex with James Cook.
Yeah.
I just don't think that either of those players are really going to, rise above that. Best case scenario is that Singletary stays a low-end RB2 based on, touchdowns and rushing work near the goal line, which I think is kind of safely his role in that offense still. But, yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it. How do you feel?
I feel similarly. If it wasn't for James Cook being drafted, I would be, I think, able to be sneakily very high on Devin Singletary just because of how he ended the season. I mean, he went from being unplayable to the last 5 games of the regular season almost being 15 or higher fantasy points every game, and I think he carried that into the actual NFL playoffs. But the drafting of James Cook worries you because for a Bills running back to be really valuable, they need to be a pass catcher, and I think Cook just completely takes that away from him. So you kind of rely on goal line work, and he's not even the build for that. So I think that, he still probably is the lead running back as far as rushing, but it limits his ceiling. Yes, Singletary. But Cook definitely has a route to becoming fantasy relevant for sure.
Agreed. So we're down to our final 3 players here. How many do we have in the RB2? Are we down to...
I think we currently have 11.
Okay, and I think that's exactly where DeAndre Swift slots in.
At the
near
top?
the top of RB2.
I'll put him at the very
near
top.
the top of RB2. You like him ahead of Williams?
I think you have to, just because of Gordon still taking away a little bit of value. That this could maybe swap by the end of the season, but I think you could.
Yeah.
I mean, I had Swift in my RB1, so I definitely think
that's true. You have him very high.
I have him very high.
As running back 9.
And I used to really hate DeAndre Swift for fantasy. I really did. But
you did.
I think that you just feel really good about his receptions. And, 62 receptions in 13 games. Now, I mean, you're hopeful that he can finish a full season healthily because he's had back-to-back seasons of 13 games. But I like the look of, this offense is getting a lot of weapons. Not that I feel great about Jared Goff, but a lot of receiving options that could make them be more versatile, at least for... I mean, Swift already was extremely versatile, which is what makes him valuable in this offense. And now that they have more ability to pass the ball, it probably improves them even more because they got to worry about other players. So I really like Swift. He's only 23. But, yeah, I think at the very top of RB2, I would feel great with Swift as my RB2.
Okay, and where he's going in ADP, that's a very realistic possibility. He usually goes around the middle of round 2. So there's a chance if you're on that lower end that you could come out of your draft with Najee and Swift and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, and I just went ahead and threw in Isaiah Spiller and Rachaad White in the stash.
That's
kind of
fair.
In no particular order, but
yeah, they're both behind clear workhorse running backs. I mean, or I'll rephrase it: clear lead running backs. Either way, the times where Eckler has missed with injury, it's been a committee behind them with Joshua Kelly and Roundtree or Larry Roundtree, I think his name is.
Yeah. Justin Jackson.
Justin Jackson. So I don't know. The idea that Isaiah Spiller is like an Alexander Madison type player where he slots in and just takes the role all to himself seems unlikely given how the Chargers have handled it in the past. But still worth drafting, obviously. And same with Rachaad White. That one less so. I feel like he is in a less positive situation than Spiller, because ultimately it's going to be, who does Tom Brady want on the field with him? So it's the truth.
Yeah.
Whether you can laugh at it if you want, but it is the truth.
Yeah, it is.
That's how it was back in New England. That's how it is in Tampa Bay. He's got a great relationship with Leonard Fournette, and as long as he stays healthy, we've already seen Fournette act or work as the pass catching back and the leading rusher. So it's a tough role for Rachaad White to break into.
Agreed. So I guess we can wrap it up. These are our tiers for the running backs. Next Monday we will have our wide receiver tiers, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, good luck in your drafts. You got anything else to add?
Just be on the lookout for those videos, and we will be having a mock draft coming out this month as well. So hopefully, the whole purpose of this is just to get you prepared, get you familiar with the incoming rookies, and changing faces in different places, kind of thing. So just stay on the lookout for more content from us.
Awesome. Peace out, everybody. See you next time.
Bye-bye.